I just want to thank everybody for being here today. This is a very momentous day for us. We are proud of the fact that Brian was so loved by the people around him, and so we decided to do this for those people and our family. So there are people apparently that are planning to speak. Anyone who wishes to, just come up and just grab the mic. Again, we thank you for being here.
I'm David Mannheimer. Some of you know me, some of you don't know me. Some of us are friends, some of us will become friends. Brian, who I used to always push his name, Chaim, he never liked to take to it. I don't know why. He was used to it. Everybody knew him as Brian, but now we should know him as Chaim. The life that he gives us now, this is the opportunity that we have to actually take a moment, take a lifetime, take whatever we need in order for us to fully understand how we can continue with him in our memory. My friendship with him began quite a few years ago. It started off in NCSY, and it blossomed to high school, to Israel, from when he was in yeshiva, for him visiting me, for him flooding my apartment, which we all can laugh at, and we all know he laughed at. He had this big smile, this great thing that he had, that he always was able to laugh at anything and everything. This is something special that we can all take, that we weren't laughing at him, but he was laughing with us. And that's the most important thing that we can learn from this. That together we should take a mitzvah upon us. We should take something that actually commemorates or exemplifies what Brian was, what Chaim was, which was a person who had Yiras Shamayim, who loved his fellow Jew, who wanted to do the best for everybody and anybody, who gave his seconds to everybody and everybody. When he was with someone, he dedicated his time to those people. And that's what's so special. When he came to me for Shabbos, to go where the action was on Yom Tif, on Simchas Torah, or different times, that he always wanted to be around the action. Wherever the action was, he dedicated his time to it. If it wasn't with me for that particular moment, it was with his family, or with his other friends. And that's what's unique. And this is what we should remember. We should remember the person that gave us and will continue to give us life. Chaim. L'chaim.
Shmai Reichman, I was very close to Brian for many years. The first thing that comes to mind when I think of Brian was the Lev Tov, as we heard by the Levaya. Rabbi Bixenspan said, he passed away at 32. Sometimes, unfortunately, the closest people to us and the best people are taken away from us early and young. Brian had such a wonderful heart, and he was always there for all of his friends. And Rabbi Bixenspan said on Thursday night, in last week's parasha, he says sometimes the Yetzer Hara tries to hold us back by telling us that we should try to tackle everything at once and try to do try to improve in all areas. He says the way that we should do it is everybody should perhaps take upon themselves something and one thing which they should work upon and do a little nishmasai, and the neshama should have aliyah. And I know for myself personally, he's changed my life in different ways, and I'm taking it upon myself that I'm going to be doing certain things and changing many different ways, and the Shalom should happen, Aliyah.
My name is Akiva Lazar. It's very interesting because every year around Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, Sukkot, whether or not I was living down here in the Lawrence, Bathurst area or up north, Henya and I, my wife, would put together, I guess, kind of like, for Simchas Torah, where everybody would come and enjoy and should come and make l'chaim. Dafka this Shabbos, I'm going through in my head, oh my gosh, Simchas Torah is coming, Sukkot is coming, and my house is open for everybody at all times. So I'm thinking in my head, and I hear my wife echoing, I got to make more cabbage rolls because Brian's coming, right? And he was a staple in my house every Yom Tov, all the time. There was not a time that I can go back inside my head and think, and he wasn't. He still is. On many levels, he stays with me and always will. But there are so many memories and so many ideas and so many moments and so many things attached to him. And Shmaya just said he changed his life. I'm going to share a story, which I generally don't like to do because it's for me it's too emotional a lot of times. But I'll share one story. I actually mentioned it to you, Edie, during the Shiva. Everybody goes through their stuff, and much like everybody else, I've gone through mine and continue to go through mine. But I remember one time, just a regular evening, Brian and I were out for a little bit, and I was hungry, whatever it was. I went into a store and I grabbed a chocolate bar, and this was many, many, many years ago. And I snapped off a piece and I gave it to Brian. And Brian looks at me and goes, I can't eat that. So I said, really, why? And he said to me, because it's not kosher. So I looked at him and I scratched my head. And I remember, I can close my eyes and picture, I turned around and I stared him square in the face. I said, you're kidding me. He goes, no. And at that moment, I took it, I threw it out the window. I said, Brian, if you can't eat it, then I can. And I'm going back, it's got to be probably 8, 9, maybe 10 years ago. And that was the last time. And every time that, you're walking down the street, you're hungry, whatever it is, you want to grab something that may not be, so perfect. I go back to that moment in my head, and it still holds me very tight. And I don't think I've veered off that more than once or twice since then. And I really attribute that to Brian. That's one of the many stories that, and most of them, and probably none of them can I actually share because he's not here to laugh with me. But people should know that Pirkei Avos says, Ezu Osher is misamech b'chelkai. And the pshat of misamech b'chelkai is a person who is not running, seeking, craving, mind spinning, always looking to do, perform, outdo more than they did yesterday. The inyan of misamech b'chelkai is a guy who legitimately just is who he is, enjoys what's going on in the moment, cares about the people he's with, as Dave Mannheimer said, and at the end of the day, doesn't want to be anywhere else in that moment, and is happy, and is truly happy. And Brian, I laughed harder with him than any other human being, and he was truly happy. He, even in moments when he may have not been happy, he was happy. And if we could pick up maybe the most minute part of that and apply it to any areas of our life, I think, everything that Brian stood for, and everything that Brian ever wanted in his life was to have a little bit of happiness. He didn't want anything else. You're not talking about a guy who ran, and again, I've had conversations with Brian that I'll take with me for the rest of my life. And I can tell you, anybody in this room, as an aid to what he said, all this man ever wanted was to, be with his friends, smile, and make other people smile. So it should be, we're in Elul, we're right before Rosh Hashanah. We're all praying to God, we're begging God. We should have the opportunity to live another year, to be able to change things that we may have not changed in the past. So maybe if we could take one split second inside our minds, not today, not tomorrow, when we're alone, when we're thinking, when nobody else is around, and apply how that we could maybe take and make somebody else a little bit more happy. We can make somebody else who we may have not wanted to, may have had an issue with, or Bixis Banner said it also by Levaya. Sometimes, actually didn't say it by Levaya, he said it by the Shir afterwards, that we all have to, somewhere in our hearts, open them up and allow for us to make and give other people a little bit of happiness wherever we can. And through that, maybe, and there's no doubt in my mind that Brian's soul sits with the highest of souls in heaven. There's no question. It's beyond question. But maybe if we could apply little aspects to our life, maybe we should be able to, and we can create an aliyah to his neshama, and it should all be a zikaron to us to fix and correct stuff that needs ticking in our lives. Shkayach.
The truth is, I don't really. I wanted to prepare something properly on Yankee Walkenstein. I sat down. I was out of town for the last few weeks. I wasn't able to finish the Mishnayos, so unfortunately I sat up last night until probably about 5 in the morning, trying to make sure that we finished Mishnayos. By the time I got home, I tried to sit down and write something out, and I simply couldn't think. I think at some level I couldn't think for the same reason that it's probably tough now, which is I think there's simply too much to say, and I don't know how to phrase it and put it into such a small amount of time. I go back with Brian probably to about 94, so about 14 years roughly, and I think it was said best before me by everyone who spoke. The main attributes that Brian really had and the things that people will remember him for. To put it simply and without getting too complex, because I think simply saying some stories will don't begin to really touch who he was. To put it very simply, I don't think I've ever met a person who had the same zest for life, which is essentially what Akiva said. That regardless, things were sometimes amazing and things were tough, and as you said also, he went through his tough moments, he went through his areas that he struggled in, but in all aspects, in every way that he struggled, he did it with a certain pizzazz. He did it with a certain belief that simply couldn't be knocked down. Could you pass that? I can't. It's okay. It's okay. And again, Akiva, he spoke very well. I think he said many of the main things to me. What will always stay in my mind is having this image permanently sort of burnt in. That to watch him laugh so hard that he lost his breath and he went 20, 30 seconds, and then this huge noise came out that could have woken up the building. Right? And like Akiva said, there's nobody that you could have laughed harder with than Brian, and that to me it's not a question of being able to focus because I'm trying to say something nice about a person. He was a brother to me. He wasn't a friend. It surpassed friendship many years ago. And he was simply someone that I knew that in any way in life that I was always able to rely on. I think he knew that about me as well. Like Akiva said, in his house, he was a staple in my house as well. Shabbos, he was always over. I was over here a little while ago with my family. You know, for me, it'll be something over the next little while that I'm going to try to put together different things and different memories and things that he can be remembered by. But the reality is I can't stand up here and I can't try to pull out stories that take away and that... So I'd simply like to say that Brian should be a military Yosher. He should be looking out for his mother, his father, his nieces and nephews, the kids that he loved so much. To me, I'll always have this image of, you know, when he comes over on a Shabbos and my son goes running over to him, and those will always be the things that I remember. But again, he should be a military Yosher. He should be looking out. He used to always say to me how much he loved to learn with my father, and he used to come over and learn. And I know without doubt right now that he's got a Chavrusa going with my father, and that they're looking out and they're learning together. Shkayach.
And I have to excuse me for reading off paper, but I'm speaking on behalf of my 5 sisters, so... Wait, do I need this?
Put it close to your mouth.
Okay. So I'm speaking on behalf of myself and my 5 sisters, so we put something together. Okay. Better? Oh, you need it for the taping? Can it pick it up like this? Then I'm just going to speak without it. Okay. So Brian was truly a brother to myself and my sisters. Coming from a family of only girls, Brian was our only male first cousin and the perfect candidate for big brotherhood. When Orly lost her license, Brian jumped at the job to drive her to school every day in his Grand Cherokee that he was so proud of. Orly recalls being late to school many times due to their emergency Krispy Kreme donut stops. Brian sauntered into our house chock full of quirky songs, nicknames, and chants for us, and a repertoire of klutzy and silly stories for us to make fun of. What better brother could you ask for than one who tickles Shayna so hard that she pees on him? Or begs many years ago. Or begs my dad to get him a Walkman and then falls into the pool the first time he wears it. Who could forget the countless Pesach Seders that Brian attended at our house, always contributing words of Torah to the discussions and keeping things interesting by getting drunk with us on Pesach Seder wine. Brian filled our house with his contagious laugh. He never had a shortage of stories to tell us about his buddies, his favorite music, or the latest in his career development. He always told us about his latest date or his plans to go to an upcoming concert. Brian took the floor at our Shabbos table with his famous imitations of characters from The Sopranos, and of course his buddy Akiva, whose raspy voice he loved to imitate. When Brian was with our family, he infused our dynamic with the lighthearted, fun silliness that only he could offer us. He added a brotherly aspect to our family that we will always miss. We were lucky to see lots of Brian. As kids, he came with us on family vacations, and to this day, he came over often on Shabbos after shul. Brian looked up to our father, his Uncle Eddie, and treated us with a loving and overprotective front. He never neglected to tell us how beautiful we looked when he saw us, and would get red in the face and pound one wound-up fist into the other with his nostrils flared and breathing heavily when he described the way he would torture and mutilate any man who came near us. Of course, Brian couldn't hurt a fly, let alone our boyfriends. I remember a friend of mine in high school recounting to me that he met Brian at Marky's, and on realizing that he was a friend of mine, Brian invited him outside to share a chat. When Yonah and Tara got married, Brian immediately welcomed their husbands to the family so warmly and lovingly. Much in the way that he treated us like sisters, he treated Za'el and Isser like brothers, always with a big bear hug or a hearty handshake. We have spent so many Shabbos meals with Brian, and without fail, he always had a Dvar Torah to share at the table. In his memory, we have spent some time learning this week's Parsha together, as well as this week's portion of Pirkei Avot. We hope in this merit, his neshama will have an aliyah, and we know Brian would appreciate us learning Torah in his honor. This week's Parsha describes the mitzvah of Shiluach HaKain, the imperative to send away a mother bird before taking the egg from its nest. This mitzvah is named as one of the greatest mitzvahs in the Torah, and one that will be greatly rewarded for. But what is so great about this mitzvah? Why do we care so much about sending the mother bird away before taking the egg? Many commentators go on to explain that this commandment is about sensitivity and mercy, that we are supposed to learn from it that if the Torah places such an important focus on the feelings of a bird, how much more so should we care about the feelings of a human being? We are supposed to learn this section of the Torah and realize that it is important to be sensitive to the feelings of all of God's creatures. Brian really embodied this attribute for us. He always showed respect and love for us, all of our guests who came to the house, and really anyone we saw him meet. He spoke with people respectfully, kindly, and was interested in what they had to say. This week's Pirkei Avot portion says, Havei mekabel kol adam b'sever panim yafot, that a person should greet everyone they see with a pleasant and happy face. Brian did that to a greater extent than anyone we know, and we admire him for that. We will all remember his warm blue eyes, laugh that went on, sometimes inaudibly, and his friendly smile. This week's Pirkei Avot also says, Havei mitalmidav shel Aharon, ohev shalom, rodev shalom, ohev et habriot, u'mekarvan l'Torah, that we should strive to be like the disciples of Aaron, who loved peace, chased after it, loved people, and strived to bring them closer to Torah. We all know how much Brian loved people and how his enthusiasm for Judaism, like Akiva said, was inspiring to others because it was loving and laid back, not judgmental and intimidating. Brian truly appreciated all people and loved them for who they are. It was very touching for us to hear from Brian's friends at the Shiva House and learn what a positive influence his presence and energy that we know so well brought to others. In this parsha, there is also a section talking about the Ben Sorah Umorah, laws pertaining to dealing with the rebellious son. According to the Torah, if a child is rebellious in a certain manner and to a certain degree, the parents are obligated to turn him into the Beis Din, and the child is stoned to death. Now you might be thinking, why am I bringing this up? What does the rebellious child have to do with Brian? There is an interesting insight related to this topic that we girls were discussing over the weekend and wanted to share. It is noteworthy that the law of the rebellious son is juxtaposed with the law of sending away a mother bird. What can we learn from these two perspectives about the parent-child relationship? What is the Torah trying to teach us? The Emek Davar explains that we send the mother bird away because if the mother would be present when we take the egg, her maternal instinct would compel her to stay to protect the child, thus risking her own life. Since we know that the mother will then die to save her child, we have to avoid capitalizing on the mother's pure love for the egg and putting her in the position to have her risk her own life. We send the mother away with compassion because no mother can handle seeing the egg that she has so nurtured being taken away. From this law, we see that the Torah understands the strong love and unconditional support a parent has for a child. Conversely, the laws of Ben Sorah Umorah, the rebellious son, describe the right of a parent to reprimand a rebellious child and punish him, even to the point of killing him. It is ironic that in the very same parsha where the strong parent-child relationship is demonstrated, we also learn the extent to which a parent can be harsh with a child. In Masachet Sanhedrin, it says that there are so many details delineating exactly what constitutes a rebellious son, and the standard is set so specifically that it is actually a totally hypothetical situation and never occurred in the history of the Jewish people, nor could it actually occur given the details of the laws associated with it. So why does the Torah include this law at all? Rav Shimon also says that even if there was a son that fit the description of a Ben Sorah Umorah, no normal parent would ever turn them in. Rather, he says, this law is intended only as a dramatic illustration to demonstrate the extent to which a parent is obligated to discipline their child. In English, we call this tough love. We have always admired the relationship that Brian shared with his parents. Uncle Jack and Auntie Edie really show us what it is to love your child with the deepest display of support and compassion, and at the same time to rear them in a strict way so that they are prepared for the world and the challenges that life brings. No doubt, Brian's balance of compassion and soft-heartedness, along with his sense of responsibility for his own actions, was a product of the way in which his parents raised him. He took pride in his hard work towards finding the right career and in building his own home and close circle of friends, and we know he appreciated the guidance and support his parents gave him while still giving him his own space. Whenever Brian spoke at our Shabbos table, at a family event, or in a one-to-one conversation with one of us, whether he was saying something serious or profound or chiding and silly, he spoke totally from the heart, always saying only that which was sincere and genuine. At a difficult time like this, it is hard for us to find the right words to say, but in the same manner that Brian always spoke to us, simply, sincerely, and lovingly, we want to speak from the heart too. Brian, thank you for being the brother we never had. We will miss you so much, and we will cherish all of our memories.
I also wrote something down. I had years of thespian training. I hope will work. It's not the microphone. The year was 2002. I'd been living on Lansdowne, and a few university friends who wanted to make the big move to TO asked if we could all get a house together. So we found one around Dufferin and St. Clair. It's a great neighborhood. It was late spring, and we had just moved in. And my friend of 6 years, Ellie Goldberg, was in town from New York, and he wanted to drop in and say hello. And he did. I was alone in the house, still sorting some boxes, and Ellie just dropped by. He walked in, and I noticed behind him a very imposing figure. "This is Brian," said Ellie. Brian was tall, but friendly. His handshake wasn't so much standoffish as it was simply polite and pensive. Brian didn't know what to make of me yet, and I didn't know what to make of him. We both sort of scrutinized each other. We both became slightly defensive in that instant, but not without reason. I glanced at his head, and I noticed his yarmulke. He caught this and glanced at my head, and noting the absence of one on mine. I think we were there both a little judgmental for a second. But after an unspoken Mexican standoff, I saw that Brian wasn't egotistical, critical, or harsh. He was the opposite on all fronts. Ellie yammered about property values the whole time, and this exchange, although possibly only in my head, which seemed like a few seconds, it seemed like a few minutes occurred in a matter of seconds. A few weeks later, and this was post-Pesach, I called Ellie to find out where he was. He was at Brian's, and they were having a nosh. So I came over to his basement apartment, Brian's basement apartment, and the three of us spent the next 2 hours pigging out on various matzah brei concoctions, arguing over whether we liked it better salty or sweet, salsa or honey. I can't remember which one won out. It was at this juncture that Brian recounted the story of the tiff that he got in with his landlord. He recounted the story with such detail, reenacting how the landlord had inappropriately chastised him, and how Brian had handled himself in a cool fashion. And he remembered the details with such accuracy and specificity. And at that point I knew that this guy had a great memory. I also learned that if he was caught in confrontation, and Brian was in the right, he was sure to handle himself with dignity and grace. This was a trait which never left him. Of course, if he felt guilty or was in the wrong, that was another matter. He dealt with that differently. I moved away from Toronto and back again about 15 months later. I lost touch with a lot of friends during that time, but around 18 months ago I was looking for someone to just hang out with, just spend time with, and Brian's name came flying into my mind. I called Ellie, I got his number, I called him, and Brian said, "Yeah, come on over." Who better? Who nicer? Brian never pushed being religious to me one iota. If I asked, he would tell me about his own Baal Teshuva story, but that was it. For months on end, we swapped stories and thoughts, moments of hilarity, humor, heartfelt sentiment in the apartment. It became a place to blow off some steam, to talk about the difficulties of work, of girls, of just getting by in the world. And there we sat, and still with his kippah on his head and none on mine. And neither of us noticed it anymore because we were just friends. We'd hit the point where you don't see the person's appearance anymore, you just see the person's spirit. We went to movies together, ate together, hung out a lot. On one occasion we went to see a film and Brian removed his kippah for the theater only. It's because we went to a theater in my neighborhood. There weren't a lot of Jews there. There was about as many Jews there as there are in the Vatican. And so he decided to take it off, and I felt bad. And he said, "No, don't worry about it. I just don't want to make you feel uncomfortable. He's doing it for me." And he put it under the sun visor in my car. Brian was a fighter. Not necessarily everyone knew this, but it's the truth. He fought like a lion. Deep inside, if he committed a transgression, he felt it and he knew it. And Brian, about 3 months ago, he'd finally started to get back on his feet. He was in between jobs, and we were talking, and all of a sudden some truths started coming out. We were sitting there talking. He'd gone through a really hard time between jobs, feeling bad. He had a lot of anger, and I don't say this negatively, because the anger wasn't the root. The root was sadness and just wanting to succeed, and the frustration of not having it led to anger. But on this night, Brian was able to let it go a bit. And the truth started coming out. Insecurities, fears, motivations, all of it. We were talking about attitude and how it affects, both of what you do and how people perceive you. And Brian was clutching this couch cushion to his chest. in an innocent fashion as he was talking. And he spoke with this honesty, and I began to go into some long verbose rant, as I'm doing right now, about people and things. And his eyes glazed over, and he said, I gotta find optimism. I gotta find optimism, because it's the only way I'm going to heal. I wish I could say I made those words up, or I wasn't paraphrasing, or I was paraphrasing. It would make me feel like a better writer or a better creator of character, but I'm not. Those were his words. Those were his direct words. Brian looked up at me after saying it in the eye. He was waiting for a reaction. I was silent. In another exchange that lasted seconds but felt like a few minutes, we just stared at each other. I was impressed by him, and more importantly, he had found something honest in himself. The silence lasted for a long time. His spirit was a lion, wanting all the confrontation to go away in favor of family, food, sleep, and peace. He smiled. He smiled that big smile that just hung there in front of you. His face. And I can still see it now, the face of a man happy with the simplest of joys. It was 30 days ago that I got a call from Yankee. I was just about to go to the gym. I don't wish to recall the horror and panic that shot through me, the utter disbelief, but suffice it to say it was intense. The only thing I knew to do was to come over here, to this area, to where I felt safe, to where I knew there would be things to be done. And I did. I got in my car and I started to make my way over to 3000 Bathurst. I jumped in and I headed over, and about halfway I realized I did not have a kippah. I had taken to wearing one in the presence of Rummies, and it was becoming more common, but I didn't have one. And a flash went through my head, and I reached up to the passenger side sun visor and I lowered it. Gently down to the seat floated a brown velvet kippah, one that showed the wear and tear of great use and the humility of a tzaddik. It was Brian's kippah. I wear it on my head today, and I try and put it on every day at least once. As I understand it, one of the reasons for wearing it is to remind us that God is above us. For me, it reminds me of two things. Not only that, but also that my friend is watching over, and someday we'll be able to shake hands again in a very different doorway than the first time we met. And I'll give him his kippah back. And in honor of Brian, I will say, may we all find optimism. May we all heal.
I too have notes. My name is Anvil Berger. Marcia and I are good friends of Jack and Edie's. We've known each other a long time. In fact, I've known Jack, I think, since we're about 10 years old. I don't have a lot to say, just a few words. This morning I was browsing through the book that was put together by Brian's friends and acquaintances, relatives, in his memory. It's called The Unfocused Thinker. But the one thing that's extremely focused is the very common theme through that book and through what everyone here this morning has been saying. And that is in describing Brian's characteristics. His warmth, his love, his strength, his humor, and the fact that he loved people so much that you couldn't help but love him back. One scenario is the one that I always see in my mind. I'd walk into Shomer Shabbos or a wedding, wherever Brian was, and I'd walk in and I'd see him standing there, schmoozing with his friends, philosophizing, talking, laughing, joking, and then he'd see me. I called him Brian, he called me Mr. Berger. Mr. Berger. Right away I knew what was coming. So I braced myself because came right over to me, gave me a slap in the back, so I had to sort of make sure I didn't go flying through the window. Then he gave me a crushing handshake, and he would say, "Mr. Berger, do you have a joke for me?" Sometimes I did, sometimes I didn't. But whatever joke I told him, he'd burst out laughing, give me another smash on the back, and then let me go. Say, when you think of Brian, you just can't help but smile. And perhaps that's the major contribution that he's made to us, his friends, his family, and all those that knew him. That even at a time like this, when we all should, and indeed do feel deeply sad, you think of Brian and you have to smile. He wouldn't let you do anything else. Chaim ben Yaakov ben Zion, Utzror b'tzror Chaim es nishmoso. His neshama should have an aliyah. He should be, as we say in Yiddish, I get your beiter for Klal Yisrael. And like the shepherd boy, he blew on his fife and was able to break the gzeira. It's the pure soul of a person like Brian that, with God's help, will bring the Mashiach to us.
Hi, I'm Jillian Weinberg. I apologize for crying. I have nothing written down, but the first thing I think about Brian is him always joining our Shabbos at our Yantiv table. And he always only wanted to come for Shabbos lunch because he knew our kids would be awake and he could play with them and throw them all over the place, and they loved it. and after the meal, before dessert, Brian would always say, "So, did you make those things? Jillian, did you make the things?" I'm like, "What things?" "Those chocolate things. You know, those chocolate things I like." We go, "Brian, the chocolate chip squares?" "Yeah, you know, I love those chocolate things." So every time he'd come for Shabbos, I'd always make the chocolate chip squares, and I'd send him home with a peckle to him to have for breakfast the next day or whatever. And sometimes he would call, or just come. We'd invite him by Friday, and I would say, "Brian, you know, you're always welcome to come, but you have to give me notice. I can make those things, the chocolate chip things for you, but I didn't have them." So he was great. He was amazing. We enjoyed his company, and after lunch and the kids would go play, we'd just meet my husband usually and him and myself, and we talked about anything. And he was like a brother. I only have sisters, and he was a brother. We talked about anything and everything, you know, girls, his work, anything he was upset about or happy about, and he was just open and free, and anything went. And I loved it that, you know, he didn't like something or somebody, he'd let you know, and it was always true and pure with him. And after he passed away, my husband and I told our son Bear, he's 6.5. He was in love with Brian. He just loved him to pieces. And Mayor has such a view of the world. We told him that Brian's not going to be coming for Shabbos anymore, and he said, "Why?" And my husband said, "He passed away." And he said, "Oh, he went to Shemayim." And my husband said, "Yes." He goes, "That's okay, because he's going to have Shabbos with Hashem and Shemayim." And he said, "Hashem comes first, we come second." So, you know, and he still talks about him a little bit here and there, and he understands. But, you know, he'll be missed, and he was amazing, and he was wonderful. And Brian, we'll miss you. You always made us laugh with anything that you said or didn't say. It was great having you, and we'll miss you.
Hi everybody. So we have to be well, sorry.
when you're a little kid and you get things wrong, you get very upset. But when you get older and you get things wrong, sometimes it feels good that you learn something. I learned a lot. How does someone become best friends with an articulate film writer, with an electrician, with all sorts of people, not just acquaintances of theirs, but close friends? How does he do it? I don't know about you guys, but I've never met anyone that's touched so many people from so many different walks of life. And I had him so wrong. Ever since he was small, whether it was finding out that he wasn't doing well in school, or later on with a job, or with a shidduch, he wasn't doing well. He was trying, and he was trying, and he was trying, but he just didn't make it. Well, he made it. Look at this. Look at his levaya. He made it. All those things pale in comparison to the ability to touch people and to become part of their lives to the extent that he did, to inspire them. I thought he was the one that needed to be schlepped and inspired. He was the one that was inspiring others. There's this interesting part of the Torah that I think most everybody knows. It's perhaps the most tragic part of the Torah. Moses is given the Aseret HaDibrot, the 2 tablets, and he finds out that the people are worshiping an idol. And he smashes the tablets on the idol. It's pulverized, little pieces, little specks of dust all over the place. The tablets, of course, were the handiwork of God. The only thing that ever entered this cosmic universe that was God's handiwork. Ma'aseh Elokim. And it's on the floor. What happened to it? The Talmud tells us that every single little piece was lovingly collected and was put somewhere. You know where it was put? In the holiest place in the world. In the Kodesh HaKdashim, in the Holy of Holies in the temple. In the Ark of the Holy of Holies. There were 2 things in that Ark. One was the complete set of tablets that were given as the replacement. And one was that set of broken pieces that they collected. So there's this Hasidic idea. You want to know how to get into Holy of Holies? There's 2 ways. One is by being complete, by being a tzaddik. Who can do that? But the other one is sometimes when you're really broken and when things fall apart, there's a certain holiness that's there that's even more complete than the other one. Like the Kotzker Rebbe says, there's nothing as complete as a broken heart. Through the Levaya and through the Shiva, this idea kept coming to my mind because I never understood it before. When you're broken, that's a portal, that's a doorway to happiness and to holiness. How? And then when more and more stories came out, and as we heard how people were inspired, the brokenness of losing a dear friend, nephew, son, cousin, it brought me closer to holiness. It taught me a fantastic lesson. It taught me something that I've read about 1,000,000 times. But when I say read about, I mean just read about. Went in here, but it didn't go in here, and it didn't go in here. And that's about humility. He turned the corner on that. He owned it. He bought it. He was it. And that's how he did this. He had a beautiful, simple humility about himself that let everybody in that big, big heart. And I hope selfishly that I will learn from that and take from that. And I hope that, like we just heard, that will bring Mashiach a giant step closer, because that's what he's waiting for us to do, just get along a little bit better together. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm sorry about the first time. I apologize for everybody, it's a little tough. Brian was my closest and best friend for the last, I'd say, probably about 8-9 years of my life. He was a family member to me, to my family, to my friends, to all of us. Brian was one of those people who came up and wasn't confident, he wasn't sure. There was nothing wrong with Brian. People loved him, he loved people. He was a regular Joe like all of us. Some days were good, some days weren't. Brian always said, you know, I can do better. I used to say to Brian, look, this year you were better off than last year. Last year you had a smaller apartment. This year you had a better apartment. This year you have a car. You have a new nephew. You have a new niece. You have a beautiful family. And he would stop and he would look and he would say, you know, you're right. Because all we do is complain. We try to achieve things in life and we want to move forward. But we never stop and look back at what we have achieved. And to me, over the last 8-9 years, seeing him grow up, he was my age. He was only about 3 weeks older than I. He was like my little brother. I used to take him places with me, explain things to him, show him things. And right before he passed away that evening, he said something to me. Yankee was going to come downstairs and sit with us. You remember that evening? And he says, you know what? I want to tell you something. He says, I want to talk to you before Yankee comes in. I said, what's up? He says, well, when Yankee comes in, I can't get a word in between you two. We never shut up. We never let him in. And I said to him, you know, you mentioned that to me before. And I said, I tried very hard all the time to make sure that you can speak, that you have a word. And he says, you know, I noticed it. I noticed you trying. I said, the reason was you mentioned it, and I want to be like him. Brian was one of those people I always said that if you said something to him and you can show him, he was one of the only people that I knew that would actually do something about it and get better at it. If I explained to him that it wasn't black, it was white, and he couldn't get the logic behind it, he would change. Not many people could do that. Not many people had the ability to sit down and say, okay, this is right and this is wrong, and if I'm wrong, I'll fix it. And Brian was one of those not lazy people. He would do whatever needed to be done if only somebody would explain to him why. He wasn't a difficult person. Me and Brian, we never argued. We never fought. We were just in the same common frame of mind. And that evening he said to me, you know, Eldad, you taught me so many things. And I didn't teach you much, only about music and movies. And I turned around to him and I said, Brian, you know, you're absolutely wrong. You taught me a lot about family, about Judaism, about history, about friends. Only he wasn't confident in himself that he was teaching anybody. But he touched every one of us. He touched the masses. We will miss him dearly. And I wish him a safe trip and a healthy and a long one. Thank you.
My name is Moshe Weinberg. My wife just spoke a couple minutes ago. My family from B'nai Torah and the Kalbs, we've known them a long time. I'm probably going to get emotional, so I'm just warning you now. I probably met Brian at the youth minyan at B'nai Torah, and that's how we became friends. And there was one time when Brian got into a little tiff in the middle of youth minyan with somebody, and I had to pull them apart. And I guess from that moment on, I felt like I was his older brother, and I was watching out for him. After I got married to my wife, and then Brian moved south, we had him over a lot for Shabbos. And he was a Ben Bias. He was a regular in our house. any time that his parents were going out of town for Yontif and he was staying here, I always made sure that if he wasn't going up to Mannheimer's or somewhere else, that we had him over for 1 or 2 meals, whatever we could. And he was usually going to Yankees or somewhere else. I guess my most cherished memories of Brian will be him playing with our children. And I guess my bracha to all of us should be Ma'aser Neshama Shav Aliyah. And Mitzvah Hashem, the Mashiach should come soon. And Tchias HaMesim should come even sooner. So Brian will be back with us. And Mitzvah Hashem will dance under his chuppah in Yerushalayim Mir Kodesh. Amen.
My name is Yisrael Gabbai. I've had the privilege of knowing Brian for the past 15 years. A couple of things I could probably say with pretty good confidence is we used to horseplay a little bit here and there, push each other around, wrestle, fight. I don't even think he even knew his own brute strength. When he gave you a bear hug, you knew it. And you felt it the week after. Huh? At the same time, when he wrapped his hands around you and he gave you a hug, you felt wanted and loved and cared for. And it was a great feeling, and was something that I'm going to miss. And I know he's a Levi, but as touched upon earlier, if I didn't know better, I'd say he was a Kohen, because Ohev Shalom, V'Rodev Shalom, he always pursued peace and pursued people. Some of you were here, some of you weren't, but I had a mutual friend. He got married. A little bit of shtick. I used to blow fire at Chasnas. I haven't done it for a little while, and my parents are very grateful. But at this particular Chasana, it didn't go as well as planned. And I was probably a little bit my ego was probably about yay big back then. And we blew the first fireball that went about 8 or 10 feet. And, we were really, really smiling. But what I didn't realize was, after the first one, some of the ethanol caught on my face. And then when I blew the second one, my face lit up kind of like a Christmas tree. And, people are pointing and laughing, and I'm thinking, wow, they must really think I'm good. Then after I realized my face is on fire, and a couple guys throw me on the floor and roll me and douse me with water. And I go running 100 feet, and I'm thinking, I'm fine, I'm great, I'm good. And I'm looking in the mirror, and I can see my lips are turning up, and things are not as good as they seem. So a couple of buddies dragged me another 150 feet to the washroom. Someone from Sahala, ripped off my tzitzis, to check me out. My father happened to be at this simcha too. And Brian was there, but he didn't quite keep up with the pack. So after he took out the 2 security guards and joined me in the washroom, it showed me that he really cared, because these 2 security guards were not exactly circus midgets. And he took the time and the effort to break in and to see how I was doing. I came back I had to go to the hospital, get a tetanus shot, and I came back, about 10 minutes before the chasna ended. And it's just one of those things that show me he cared when most people wouldn't have. And he never claimed to be the Gadol Ador, he never claimed to be the Mashiach. He is what he was, and he was a real mensch. And mensch l'chek starts at home, and you raised a real fine son. And may his neshama have an aliyah.
This is a slightly selfish thought, something I've been struggling with for the last month. It was mentioned at the Levaya that we should all ask for Mechila. And that really killed at the moment. You mentioned that Brian was searching for healing. He was looking for a way to heal that which I feel I partly caused. I'm sure a lot of us did what I did, was pick. Periodically, Brian and I, you guys were kind of buddies and everything pleasant. Brian and I butted heads on a regular basis. Every Shabbos there was an argument which ended in me apologizing usually to Brian for being too loud, too aggressive, too whatever, usually embarrassing my husband, my children, whatever. And especially now, before Rosh Hashanah, I really feel a need to, because I can't ask Brian for Mechila, I really ask him to ask you and beg Eibishter that we, and by the way, I should say, Brian would give Mechila, he would forgive the moment you would open your mouth. He was forgiving, he was generous, and he was never the one to pick on people like I did. He would never put another person in a situation where he would be forced to defend himself, really. And this is something that we should learn, that I should learn from Brian. Forgiveness and kindness to another Yid. Just a thought for all of us.
You know, one time, Brian told me a story. He said that he went to the rabbi, reading, and he said that the rabbi told you that Jews with blue eyes came from intermarriage.
Oh, no, he didn't. I heard a rabbi speak about that.
Okay.
I didn't go to a rabbi.
So it used to be a joke between us. He used to call me his Arab brother, and I used to call him a non-Jew, my non-Jew brother. He was good that way. He always introduced himself to anybody in any situation, and Brian made sure that everything was finished. There was no open ends with Brian. You know, if you did good, you tell you. If you didn't do, you will apologize for it right away. There was no way around. And I think he touched a lot of people. We had the thing with Brian for many years in the beginning where Brian believed that women should not be friends with men. His belief was that women were meant for marriage, and you don't keep them around. And for a while, we started bringing our friends around, and there were women. And about 2 years later, he said, your friends are coming by? And I said, Brian, what do you mean my friends? They eat your food, they come to your place, you go on vacation with them, and you still call them my friends. And only after that, you realize that these people actually became his friends, and it was really tough for him to see that people accepted him and were his friends, not other people's friends. Because he used to say to me, oh, they're your friends, they're coming because of you, or their thing. And then after a while I said, well, you went on vacation with 3 women. For 5 days you went to the Adirondacks to see Ali and Ronnie. And I said, well, if they weren't your friends then, I'm sure you put up a hell of a fight. They were all over him for 3 days. So the toughest thing for him was, I think, to see that people actually loved him for him. Because it was kind of tough for him to see the confidence that he needed, you know. And he never let anybody push him around. He actually saved somebody's life at work.
I know.
He gave him the Heimlich maneuver, he saved his life. So we all know Brian in many, many different ways. I'm sure he touched every one of us in a specific manner. He learned from us, he taught us. There's no replacing him, let's put it that way. Even friends and family we heard about. When we walked into restaurants after he passed away, people were just uneasy. You know, and I think it sent like a tremor through the religious community. And I had people coming from nowhere, people I didn't know, even at the funeral. I was blown away. I seriously was blown away how many people who met him once or twice were taking time off work and out of their life to come to pay respect. And that means that person was special beyond belief, because these are not people that he hanged around with or worked with or anything. They just met him through a friend once or twice, and he came by the masses to give the respect. He was unique. He would be dearly missed, and friend for life.
Where's Orly?
she's going back to New Jersey. She had to go. She tried. She shouldn't come first.
Oh, no, I did this for her so that she could see us.
I want to thank, I hope you can all hear me. I want to thank my wife for putting all this together and her friends for helping her. Of course, you know, Brian, although he's Shulam, had a loving family. Mother, father. Uncles, aunts, cousins, married cousins, will be here. But Brian was especially married to his husband. He was married to his friends. It's very easy to eat cake and enjoy simchas with your friends, but it's very difficult as Brian went through the trials and tribulations of his friends as if it was his own trials and tribulations. And I'm sure all his friends can relate to what I'm saying. On behalf of my wife and myself, I want to wish you all a good Yontif in the month of Elul. Starts next 40 days. We should all do tshuva. And we should elevate Christ and Shalom in our own ways.
Jack, you should know one thing. Many times, you should know that there was nothing more that meant anything to Brian, not to disappoint his father. Jack, you know what happened with the ticket, parking ticket?
Yeah.
You should know it drove him crazy that for 3 seconds that he could possibly aggravate his father, and nothing like friends, everything. But to do something for his father and mother, that surpassed at all times everything. I remember after he got stabbed, I'm watching the news and the stabbing at Lawrence and Bathurst, and all of a sudden there's Brian on a stretcher waving. That's I'm looking at it. My stomach was like I was sick to my stomach, and I called him and he's not answering his phone. I called everybody around, nobody's answering his phone. Anyways, 3 hours later, what the hell happened? He goes, this guy on my floor, crazy guy, whatever, walking down the street, he stuck me in the back. I said, he stuck you in the back, what do you do? He goes, I keep it, you would have been proud. You would have been proud. I took care of it, I held him down, and I said, okay, we'll talk later. I went to his apartment after everybody had gone to sleep, the kids were sleeping. I said, Hannah, I gotta go. I gotta go see Brian. I sat down with him. There was nobody else around. It was quiet. It was just me and him. And I looked at him. He goes, I could have died today. So I said, yeah, but you didn't. He goes, I guess it wasn't my time. I guess not. He goes, I got a second chance, didn't I? So I said, I'm going to tell you one thing. He goes, take advantage of the fact that it just wasn't my time right now. And you should not have a shear in my house anymore. And the reality is I have to give credit to Brian and to Stevie Dolphin and to Yankee Walkenstein, because without the three of them, the truth is they were originally, Brian was the beginning of what's turned into 25, 30 people coming to learn every week. And he literally, I text messaged him 50 times a week, and I drove him absolutely insane to be there. And for the most part, 60, 70% of the time, he was there. Just like, to be there to learn. He had a very tight relationship with our big Hispanic, which also moved him in many, many ways. But, just to further what you said, if there's one thing that I have to do in my life, it's, when Brian would come up to Thornhill, whenever he came up to Thornhill, he had conflict with where he should, he was staying by day Manhattan, and I don't want to disrespect my host. Everything about him was about, I don't want to hurt somebody else, I don't want to put somebody else in. These are my hosts, I'm a guest of theirs, I can't make him feel bad. Everything was tried on every level of life to be proud of, and it's something that's so admirable, something I have to try in every aspect. And I only feel bad, and I told my wife weeks ago that he asked me many times, when am I going to come to you for Shabbos? When am I going to come to you for Shabbos? And I'm not going to have the opportunity to have him for Shabbos right now. But that sits with me. And I wasn't more proactive about it. But you only have, Edie and Jack, you only have what to be proud of. On every level in life, you only have what to be proud of. And it should stay with you, it should stick with you, you should know it.
I forgot there's something else I wanted to say while I was out there. One of my favorite parts of Shabbos was Shabbos afternoon. Brian would come to Mincham after Shomer Shabbos because otherwise he was at Rabbi Dixon's Vander's shul. And between Mincham and instead of going down to Shal Shuddis, we'd usually sit and schmooze, Brian and I and Andrew and anybody else, Schwartzbein, his friend. And after Brian was nifter, we usually talked about wrestling. And after Brian was nifter, we didn't want to do it without Brian there. Andrew and I took Mishnay's Chagiga from the list for his Shloshim, and we completed it. And now Andrew and I are going to start from Brachos, and we're going to be learning Mishnay's every Shabbos afternoon between Mitchamar. And Brian's in the Shabbos and Aliyah, and we're not going to be talking about wrestling.
Dessert.
Thank you, everybody, for coming, and please help yourself to dessert. Thank you.